In the vibrant heart of Los Angeles, Grace Morgan, a 42-year-old billionaire widow, lived in a mansion of glass and marble. To the outside world, she was a woman who had it all: success, elegance, and power. Her late husband's empire, once on the verge of collapse, had been transformed under her leadership into a global powerhouse. Grace's name often appeared on magazine covers, her fashion praised, her business acumen admired. Yet, beneath the glittering chandeliers and polished floors of her estate, there lingered a loneliness and a sorrow no headline could capture. Wealth had given her everything except peace. The root of Grace's pain was her daughter, Emily Morgan, just 14 years old. 2 years earlier, Emily's life had changed forever after a devastating car accident. Doctors had fought to save her, and though her life was spared, her legs no longer carried her. Since then, Emily lived in a wheelchair, confined to a fate that seemed unbearable for such a young girl. Grace, desperate for a cure, poured her fortune into specialists, hospitals, and therapies across the country. Nothing worked. Each failed attempt felt like another weight added to Grace's already heavy heart. Emily's struggle went far beyond her physical condition. She had once been full of energy, dancing through the halls of the mansion and filling every room with laughter. Now, she spent most of her days quietly reading, painting, or staring out of her window at the world she felt separated from. Grace often caught her daughter pretending to smile, as if to shield her mother from the truth. But the emptiness in Emily's eyes was unmistakable. Grace would retreat to her private room at night and cry silently, wishing she could trade all her wealth for her daughter's happiness. One summer afternoon, as if fate had decided to intervene, Grace's limousine stalled on the outskirts of Los Angeles. They were far from the usual luxury neighborhoods, and the sudden stop irritated Grace, who had back-to-back business calls waiting. The driver got out to assess the problem, but Emily, who rarely left the mansion, insisted on stepping outside. "I just need a little air, Mom," she whispered. Reluctantly, Grace agreed, though her protective instincts screamed otherwise. That decision led them to a small roadside mechanic shop with faded paint, grease-stained floors, and a humble sign that read, "Carter's Auto Repairs." It was there they met Daniel Carter, a 36-year-old mechanic. His hands were covered in oil, his shirt worn, and his face slightly tired from long hours of work. Yet, when Emily wheeled herself closer, Daniel crouched down to her level without hesitation. Unlike so many others, he didn't glance at her chair or offer false pity. Instead, he met her gaze directly, his voice soft but steady. "Engines are like people," he said with a quiet smile. "Sometimes, they don't need the fanciest tools to fix them. Sometimes, they just need patience and a little belief." Emily giggled for the first time in months, a sound that startled Grace. It wasn't the shallow laugh she often forced, but a genuine burst of joy. Grace froze, stunned by the sight. In that small moment, Daniel had given Emily something she hadn't seen in a long time: hope. Grace stood silently, her mind racing. How could a poor mechanic, who likely had never known the luxuries her daughter was surrounded by, reach her in a way that no doctor or therapist could? That simple exchange sparked the beginning of something none of them could have imagined. Weeks turned into months, and what had started as a chance encounter slowly grew into a bond that none of them could have predicted. Grace, cautious and skeptical at first, hesitated to allow Daniel into their carefully guarded world. Yet Emily's insistence was undeniable. She wanted him around, not as a doctor or a therapist, but as someone who saw her as more than her wheelchair. Slowly, Grace relented, and Daniel became a regular visitor to the mansion. His presence, so ordinary and unpolished compared to the circles Grace was used to, began to fill the home with something long forgotten, genuine warmth. Daniel had a way of teaching Emily patience without making her feel broken. He brought spare car parts into the house and explained how rebuilding an engine was never about rushing. "It's about fixing one piece at a time," he would say as Emily worked with her therapist, frustrated with slow progress. His words turned therapy sessions into challenges, not chores. Each stretch, each movement became like tightening a bolt or replacing a gear. Emily began to see herself not as a girl trapped in a chair but as someone being rebuilt, piece by piece, into something stronger. Unlike the doctors who had grown weary of her setbacks, Daniel refused to lose faith. Every time Emily wanted to give up, he reminded her that broken things could be fixed. "If a car can roar back to life after breaking down, so can you," he would whisper, steady and calm. His belief in her was unwavering, and for the first time in years, Emily began to believe in herself. Grace often watched from a distance, torn between awe and disbelief. She had spent millions on experts, yet it was this humble mechanic who reached her daughter's spirit. Then came the rainy afternoon that would change everything. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, and the sound of raindrops tapping against the glass filled the room. Daniel stood beside Emily, his hands lightly supporting her as she gripped a walker. Her body trembled, her legs quivering from the strain of bearing weight they had long forgotten. Grace stood silently in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, her heart pounding. Daniel's voice was steady, guiding her forward, one bolt at a time. "Emily. One step at a time. You've got this." Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. With a sudden burst of determination, Emily shifted her weight and pushed forward. One shaky step landed, then another. Her legs wobbled violently, but they held. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she gasped in disbelief. Grace's knees gave out beneath her, and she sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the sight. She could hardly breathe as she watched her daughter defy what doctors had said was impossible. Daniel's face broke into a proud, glowing smile, but his voice stayed calm, anchoring Emily with reassurance until she took another trembling step forward. When Emily finally collapsed into her chair, she was smiling through tears. Grace rushed forward and wrapped her daughter in her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered, choking on emotion. But Emily shook her head and pointed at Daniel, her voice steady through her tears. "We did it." That night, as Grace sat alone in her study, she realized something profound. Her wealth had built skyscrapers, companies, and empires, but none of it had rebuilt her daughter's spirit. That honor belonged to Daniel. For the first time in years, Grace wept not from sorrow but from gratitude for the poor mechanic who had given her daughter the priceless gift of walking again.